Alright, I'm going to take you through making a shoulder pad piece by piece. Just getting everything lined up here real quick. Using some 330 denier cordura and some spacer mesh. And you sew the two right sides of the fabric together. And you're using a 1/2 inch seam allowance here. Trying to do everything just freehand without using clips or pins or anything like that. It's nice to use clips or pins to get everything lined up, but it takes a lot of extra time to do that too. Trim all the excess, then we're going to flip this right side out, and then we're going to top stitch. Basically, we're going to be top stitching from the other side to get this totally flat. Try to get everything lined up as good as possible here. Make sure each side is about the same length or width of fabric left over. Remove this sewing guide here. I just use that to get my 1/2 inch seam allowance initially. So I'm going to do this with about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Just top stitch all the way through. Sorry if my hands are getting in the way here. So now this is what we have. And then we're going to bind one side along here, and once we've done that, we will insert the foam into the little sleeve that we created, and then we will bind the other side and close that off. This fabric has lots of frays and hairs and stuff on it, so I try to trim it off as much as possible. I don't want it to stick out from underneath the binding. Ideally, I'd be using 500 denier cordura for this, but I don't have any right now. Alright, that looks pretty good. Take one of our pieces of binding tape here. I'm trying to do all this freehand as much as possible. It saves a lot of time. And we're going to fold the binding tape over like that on one end. Get this started in the machine. Oh, I forgot to melt the edges of the fabric there. Once I get a few threads laid down, then I will make sure everything's tucked in place properly, and then I'm going to fold over this other edge. You probably can't see it, it'll be off camera. Melt the end so it doesn't fret. see there what we got going on. Trim off the ends. And then we're going to do our second row of binding. Or stitching on the binding, I should say. I think I just ran out of bobbin thread. Yep. It's been handy to have a bunch of pre-round, well, wind up a bunch of bobbins with the correct thread, have them handy. And if you don't have gigantic hands like I do, it's a lot easier to put this in place. Alright, so now we've got both rows of stitching done on our binding tape, and then we're going to take one of our foam pads. This is Volara foam. We're going to slip it inside, and then we're going to do our next row of binding here. You want to make sure they're both folded to the same side. So as you can see on this one here, this one's folded over this way, and this one over here is folded under the other way. You want to make sure they're both on the left and right side folded in the same orientation, because we're going to lay Velcro hook on one side and loop on the other, and it's going to cover up those little folds. Probably should have pre-melted all my ends before I started this. There we go. There's one of the stitches on the binding. Snip off our ends. We don't want this to get caught under there. And then we're going to do our second row of stitching here. Not too bad. Alright, so now we need to look at the orientation of how this is going to fold over. We want to have the loop on the underside of the trifold and the hook on the top side. So we're going to set up our loop fabric. I already have some basting tape here. I'm going to get this in place. And then put our elastics underneath. Hopefully you can see that. About a 1/4 inch in from the edge of the binding tape. Do a box stitch here. And then here I'm going to use a ruler and line up as close as I can from the middle of the needle to the far corner on the Velcro. Just try to hit that line the whole way. A little too much. And we're going to go across this way one more time. And then we're going to come across diagonal again. And this way one more time. Lock it in. So, after we get the hook on there, this will fold like this, and the hook Velcro will fold over the top, and then you'll have the elastic loops on the outside edge. So now let's get our hook in place. You want to get the hook pretty close to the outside edge so you don't have a little lip. So when it's folded over, you don't want this edge to lift off, could get caught on something. Do another box stitch here. normally I would prep the webbing and everything a little bit better. The binding, melt all the corners of everything. I didn't do a whole lot of preparation for this, but there we go. It's pretty much done. Fold this over this way. Fold the pad over, the Velcro over, and then you've got yourself a nifty shoulder pad.